It's May 1st here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with the medical school admissions quota for next year. Medical schools nationwide are expected to push to raise the number of admissions by between 1,500 and 1,600 next year. The new head of the Korea Medical Association took up the role beginning Wednesday. President Yoon is likely to hold a press conference to mark his second year in office as early as in the coming week, a move aimed at refining the administration's sense of public sentiment. Gaza ceasefire talks are ongoing, but Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says his country will invade Rafah with or without a deal. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is due to meet Netanyahu to press him on Gaza aid measures. Most medical schools in the country have made their final decisions on their prospective enrollment figures for 2025 admissions. Totaling around 1,500 more students nationwide. Our Lee Si-hoo starts us off this morning.
Most medical schools affected by the government-led enrollment quota increase have finalized their enrollment figures for 2025 admissions, and it seems there will be 1,550 more students admitted on top of the current enrollment quota of 3,058, which has been frozen since 2006. That's less than the government's original plan to increase the number of student doctors by 2,000. Most national universities outside the capital region decided to admit around 50% fewer students than first planned. Most private universities are either sticking to their original plan or decreasing admissions by just 10 to 20 students. National universities were given much more room to increase numbers than private universities, with the government originally expecting an increase of 800 students nationwide. But it's expected the overall increase will be just half of that number, or around 400, due to strong opposition, especially from student and trainee doctors. The estimate is based on the decisions of all but one of 9 national universities outside the capital which have made their decisions, and the assumption that Jeonnam National University, which will decide its enrollment by mid-May, will follow the overall trend. Once all universities have made their decisions, the Korean Council for University Education will review the numbers. The final numbers will then be reflected in medical school application guidelines to be announced in late May or early June. Meanwhile, the nation's largest doctors group, the Korean Medical Association, which has maintained its firm opposition to the increase, launched its new leadership on Wednesday. The new president, Lee is expected to voice even stronger opinions against the government plan. Im has argued for decreasing total enrollment by up to 1,000, citing South Korea's low birth rate as the reason. He plans to form a consultative body consisting of medical students, doctors, and medical professors to prepare for a talk with the government. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
It's Labor Day here in South Korea, yet medical professors at all of the so-called Big Five hospitals have decided to take a weekly day off from work. Now, can they be held responsible for suspending medical services? We're joined by Professor Song Se-ryun this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Some of the doctors actually halted services starting yesterday on Tuesday as part of that plan. This isn't technically illegal, or is it?
There is a gray area in this case, because if you look at the doctors as workers, then there are rights and duties assigned to them. I think that the government's argument is that they are, if they can be viewed as laborers, especially interns and residents, then the organized action is only allowable through labor unions. And since the Medical Association is not a labor union in their view, this whole act of organized action is illegal. I think on that basis, they can view this as an illegal act. However, the doctors, as you know, has a beneficial function to the society, but they are also citizens having a right to choose trades and organize their affairs. So it would be pretty hard, if at all, to push this as a labor disputes all the way through. So that's why I think the government is having a difficulty in defining this as a straightforward labor dispute.
Definitely. Yesterday, Tuesday, was the first week of them having a weekly day off. But how long can the doctors actually continue taking this day off? I mean, as long as they want, how does that work?
The government has already issued an order to get back to work based on Korean Medical Service Act. But the applicability of the act itself is controversial because although, yes, government has a power to order them back to service, but those are situations where it is direly necessary. Those doctors and hospitals that are taking a day off, they're not the only medical service available in Korea. The patients potentially can go to other doctors, other hospitals. So it's not like it's a emergency situation like wars or where the other medical services are not available. Doctors are not employees of the government, they're not civil servants, so it would be very difficult for the government to maintain that the total control of the situation is under ministry.
Right, that's why.
I think that yes, I wanted to add that that's why they are invoking the fair trade argument, the violation of fair trade, and they've initiated the legal actions, but that's also controversial as well.
Definitely. That's why it's been so tricky, even though the government has been calling on the doctors to return to work. And at the same time, there is also speculation that the government is reviewing if this collective action by professors violates any law. The question is, can the government take steps to actually punish those doctors or professors?
Well, there would also be going to dispute between whether they can interpret the Medical Service Act in their favor. As we were discussing before, the government does have the power to order them back to work, and they can ban the collective action under the labor laws. But if those laws don't apply in this situation, because their laws, those kind of laws tend to be applied in a narrow basis, it would be very difficult for the government to order them back. I think that this is a political situation rather than legal situation, and the disputes between the doctors and government involves the industry dynamics and the economic factors, and also a lot of liberties guaranteed by the Constitution get involved. So I think that it should have been a negotiation-based, consensus-based action in the first place, but pushing this to an extreme on both sides have landed us in a situation where we have to look at the legal languages very carefully, where these kind of decisions have rendered exactly before.
Right. Professor Song, let me be a bit dramatic here. What if the absence of those doctors takes a toll on the patients who are actually left behind in hospitals? Let's say, emergency care and surgeries don't take place as needed because of those missing professors and doctors. Can the government then take actions against the doctors?
I think that has to be looked at in different situations. Sure, in normal cases, if the doctors are taking a day off, they reschedule their treatment days. But emergency care is a little bit different. Emergency care is something that the government can probably take more drastic actions in that. But even that, they could say, well, if the emergency care facility is not available, you can go to other doctors. There are a lot of hospitals in Korea other than those participating in taking a treatments off. So that would be a battle. I think that the government still would insist that under the Medical Services Act, they have the power, but that would be decided in the court if needs to be. But I wouldn't bet on government saying the absolute power.
Definitely. All right. Thank you, Professor Song, so much for your insight this morning. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
President Yoon is likely to hold a press conference to mark his second year in office and revive a senior secretary post in charge of civil affairs in a move to sharpen the administration's sense of public sentiment. According to sources within Yoon's office, the president may hold a media conference as early as next week, either before or after May 10th. That's the day of his inauguration in 2022. This comes after Yoon vowed to improve communication with the media and the public, following his ruling People Power Party's heavy defeat at the general election last month. Now, the president hasn't held a press conference since August 2022, which was to mark his 100th day in office. The top office may also recruit a new senior secretary for civil affairs, a position Yoon scrapped. The secretary would broadly manage personnel issues within the administration and pick up on political trends and public sentiment. And President Yoon hosted Angolan President João Lourenço at his office on Tuesday, during which they agreed to expand economic cooperation. And this comes ahead of South Korea's summit with African countries in June. Our correspondent Kim Do-yeon has the details.
South Korea is seeking closer ties with Angola, a nation rich in natural resources and with a young, productive population. President Yoon hosted a summit on Tuesday with Angolan President João Lourenço at Yongsan Presidential Office. This is the first time in 23 years for an Angolan president to meet a South Korean president in Seoul.
앙골라는 천연 자원이 풍부하고 젊은 인구의 비중이 높습니다. 한국은 우수한 기술력과 경제 발전 경험을 보유하고 있습니다. 오늘 정상회담에서 양국의 강점을 바탕으로 상호 협력을 더욱 확대해 나가는 방안을 깊이 있게 논의하길 기대합니다.
The two nations signed 4 MOUs following the summit. Those include a memorandum of understanding on creating a trade and investment promotion framework between the two nations' trade ministries. Other government agencies also agreed to work together. This is on top of the investment MOU signed on Monday by the two countries' trade promotion agencies, KOTRA and APEX. President Lourenço explained that South Korea is a country to learn from.
There could be cooperation between agencies and surely in the private sector. South Korea has experience of extensive development in a short period, so I'm looking forward to sharing and learning in this aspect together.
Angola's natural resources include oil and gas, diamonds, cobalt, and nickel, all essential for South Korea's industries. As a result, the two already have been enjoying economic exchanges, including Korean companies participating in the construction of major facilities in Angola and cooperating in Angola's renewable energy projects. This comes as both countries seek to expand their influence in each other's geopolitical regions. In June, South Korea is set to host the first ever Korea-Africa summit, which the Angolan president acknowledged during the meeting. Angola, meanwhile, has been deepening ties with Beijing, including the Angolan president's state visit to China. President Lourenço also voices concerns over global tensions, including North Korea's provocations. The top office said the two agreed on the need for international cooperation to thoroughly implement UN Security Council resolutions in response to North Korea's ongoing nuclear and missile development and provocations. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Despite ceasefire negotiations gaining momentum, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed Tuesday to invade Rafah. The remarks also come despite Washington's opposition, while the U.S.'s top envoy is set to meet the Israeli leader to press for more aid for Gaza. Lee Seung-jae reports.
It's been nearly 7 months since the armed conflict between Israel and Hamas began in October 2023. And another round of negotiations has begun. A deal would mean the release of Israeli hostages, aid relief for Palestinians, and avoiding an Israeli offensive in Rafah. However, all that seems to be up in the air now, as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made it clear that an Israeli offensive in Rafah will be conducted with or without a deal. Netanyahu and his government have called the southern Gaza region Hamas's last stronghold, with the Israeli leader emphasizing that stopping the war before achieving all of its goals is out of the question. Responding to Netanyahu's remarks, the White House on Tuesday expressed its opposition to a Rafah offensive. According to White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby, the U.S. doesn't want to see an operation that hasn't factored in safety and security of the over 1.5 million Palestinian refugees in the region. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Tuesday that during his planned talks with Netanyahu, he would convince Israel that it needs to allow for an increased flow of aid into Gaza. Blinken says while there have been some improvements in the humanitarian aid situation in the enclave, much more is needed to ensure proper assistance reaches the Palestinians in a sustained manner. Wednesday's meeting between Blinken and Netanyahu will come on the back of U.S. President Joe Biden's warning to the Israeli leader that Washington's policy could shift if Israel fails to address civilian harm, humanitarian suffering, and the safety of aid workers. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The UN watchdog on North Korea's violations of Security Council sanctions comes to an end this week, following Russia's veto on the renewal. Now, this has sparked concerns about the future of international efforts to restrain Pyongyang's nuclear and weapons programs. Our Peunji has more.
The mandate of the United Nations panel monitoring sanctions against North Korea is set to expire. Since its creation in 2009, the so-called panel of experts has played a key role in seeking to enforce UN Security Council resolutions against North Korea. The 8-member panel has produced related reports twice a year, keeping the international community informed about the regime's nuclear and missile activities. But back in March, Russia vetoed the annual renewal of the panel, effectively bringing an end to its 15 years of operation, when the mandate expires on April 30th. Now, South Korea and the international community seek new ways to monitor North Korean sanctions. Seoul's foreign ministry said Tuesday that it'll closely cooperate with like-minded countries to create a new mechanism to monitor the North.
Even though the UN Security Council expert panel's mission to monitor North Korean sanctions would expire, the Security Council resolution against the North remains effective. The South Korean government will continue to work closely with the international community to ensure sanctions implementation.
Meanwhile, the UN sanctions monitors have concluded that a missile that landed in Ukraine earlier this year was a North Korean missile, a violation of the arms embargo on the North. Reuters reported on Monday that the panel concluded in a 32-page report to the Security Council Committee that debris recovered from a missile that landed in Kharkiv on January 2nd derived from North Korea's Hwasong-11 series missile. South Korea, the U.S., Japan, and other Western countries have accused Russia of violating UN Security Council resolutions by using North Korean missiles and ammunition in its war against Ukraine. But both Russia and the North have denied the accusations, saying they were not based on evidence. Peunji, Arirang News.
Kpass, a public transportation fare discount card offering discounts of up to 53%, officially launched on Wednesday. The nationwide discount program requires users to utilize public transportation at least 15 times a month to qualify for the partial reimbursement of travel costs for using public transport up to 60 times a month. However, in the first month, Kpass users will be reimbursed even if they make fewer than 15 trips. Kpass is available in both prepaid or deferred cards and reimbursed in cash for mileage the following month. The program covers city buses, subways, and the GTX. However, KTX and the SRT high-speed trains and intercity buses are excluded.
Good morning, I'm Kim Ji-young, and now we turn over to stories from around the world. We begin today in the U.S., where former President Donald Trump has been fined $9,000 and held in contempt of court for violating a gag order issued to protect witnesses and jurors in his hush money trial. Justice Juan Merchan accepted 9 out of 10 online statements flagged by prosecutors as violations, each costing Trump $1,000. The online posts were made between April 10th and 17th, including an article where Michael Cohen, his former lawyer and a prominent witness in the trial, was called a serial liar. Trump said outside the courtroom that the gag order is totally unconstitutional before posting on his Truth Social platform that Judge Merchan had taken away his free speech rights, claiming that the trial is rigged. The fine is due on Friday. Judge Merchan said he will consider further penalties for Trump's additional statements on Thursday's hearing. Moving over to the UK, a 14-year-old boy has been killed and 4 others injured after an attacker went on a rampage armed with a long sword in northeast London. A 36-year-old suspect has been arrested by the Metropolitan Police. At around 7 a.m. local time on Tuesday, London's Met Police responded to reports of a car crashing into a house in Hainault and people being stabbed. The attacker also injured 2 police officers before he was tasered and arrested. While the police said investigations are underway for an incident they described as truly horrific, Met Police Chief Superintendent Stuart Bell said that the attack is unlikely to be terror-related or targeted. Chief Superintendent Bell also said that the 14-year-old boy had died shortly after being taken to hospital, while the 2 officers and 2 civilians had received significant stab wounds but were not life-threatening. In northern Peru, a bus crash has killed 25 and injured 13 others as it overturned and crashed down a slope into a river on Sunday evening. In what is the country's deadliest highway accident in the past 2 years, local media outlets reported that the bus was traveling from the nearby town of Selendín to the town of Sorochuco in the Andean Mountains. The injured have been taken away to the Cajamarca Regional Hospital, while in a statement released on Monday, the local government announced 3 days of mourning. Now to the U.S., where the winner of the 8th largest Powerball jackpot was revealed on Monday. The winner of the $1.3 billion prize is Cheng Charlie Saipan, who emigrated to the U.S. from Laos in 1994. Saipan had worked as a machinist until he was diagnosed with cancer in 2016 and has been undergoing chemotherapy, receiving his latest treatment just last week. While accepting the prize money, he said, "How am I going to have time to spend all of this money? How long will I live?" Saipan said he would split the money with his wife and a friend. The jackpot has a cash value of around $422 million after taxes. He has decided to take a lump sum payment. The biggest lottery jackpot ever in the U.S. was a $2.04 billion in California in 2022.
Good morning. If you're taking a day off today because it's Labor Day here in Korea, depending on where you are, you might need an umbrella and a jacket or sunblock. If you're in the southern regions, there could be on and off spotty rain, so have an umbrella handy throughout the day today. However, those of us in central regions need sun protection items with plenty of sunshine in the forecast. UV rays will be very high in the afternoon. And along with sunshine, afternoon temperatures will be a couple of degrees higher for central areas, but cloudy skies and rain will bring down the highs in the southern provinces this afternoon. Meanwhile, East Coast regions will be even breezier due to easterly winds with a high of 18 degrees in Busan this afternoon. Meanwhile, Seoul tops out at 24 degrees and the air quality will be normal to good nationwide all day today. Heading towards summer-like temperatures through Saturday, that nationwide rain in the forecast on Children's Day afternoon continuing into next Monday. With that in mind, let's take a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for Thursday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.